Broadcasting live from the Business RadioX studios in Atlanta, Georgia, it's time for Coach the Coach Radio. Brought to you by the Business RadioX Ambassador Program, the no-cost business development strategy for coaches who want to spend more time serving local business clients and less time selling them. Go to brxambassador.com to learn more. Now, here's your host.
Lee Cantor here, another episode of Coach the Coach Radio, and you're in for a treat with this one. Today on the show, we have Brian K. Haney, who is a team effectiveness coach. Welcome, Brian.
Hi, Lee.
I am so excited to be chatting with you today. Before we get too far into things, tell us about your practice, how you serving folks, and the journey you've been on to get to where you are today.
Well, my practice right now is in the middle of a pivot. So let's see. Where do I start my story? Up till last December of 2020, I was I worked at Google, and there I was doing internal coaching. I did a little bit of external coaching too, just on the side. But I was doing career and leadership coaching at Google until I left Google a year ago, and I've been taking 2021 as a sabbatical year. And I'm now at the point where I need to reboot my side business to become my primary occupation.
So how's the transition?
Well, I'm experimenting with different brands and different branding ideas. Like you introduced me as a team effectiveness coach. That's one of the emphases in my practice. I'm considering being a little more of a I was experimenting with the pirate coach or a rebel coach, but what I really want to do is I want to focus on team leaders who want to kind of take their team to the next level and do things in a way that might be a little unorthodox in the traditional organizational perspective.
Now, in your past, you've worked a lot with self-managed teams.
Some. So that's where I got started. Back in 2016, when I was at Google, my cloud support team of about 75 engineers and program managers, we started practicing holacracy, and we did that for a few months until we had a larger reorganization, and our new directors who were assigned to our team said, "We don't understand this. We don't know why you're doing it. We don't want to do it anymore." So that was kind of my introduction to coaching, was in that context, because I was basically I became the in-house holacracy expert, and I was coaching my peers and other leaders on the larger team to basically redefine their role. Because if they couldn't be managers, what could they be? Well, they had to be leaders, or they could be leaders. And so I was helping them transition from being managers to leaders.
Now, for those, can you explain a little bit about holacracy? Because I know a little bit about it, and I'm kind of fascinated by it, and especially to be talking to somebody who implemented, or at least attempted to implement it. Can you talk about what you like about it, what you don't like about it, and kind of the theory behind it?
Well, what I liked the things I liked most about it was a sense of autonomy, the sense of agency in my roles, and every role, in my opinion, should have a purpose. That wasn't required of holacracy, but if every role had a well-defined purpose, that kind of gave focus for what you would do to energize that role, and that sense of clear direction and agency, I found that rather intoxicating. It reminded me of when I first joined Google back in 2006 and how I felt empowered. And that was all in a corporate environment. I didn't expect that.
And then the basis of it is a very flat organization, right?
Not necessarily, not really. So there's still a hierarchy there, but it's not a hierarchy of managers. It's a hierarchy of circles. So there's there's still a structure, and the structure can be deep, but that creates a what I would call latency in the organization. So it makes the organization respond slower, or more slowly, I should say. But there's still, it's not, I wouldn't really call it flat.
But the autonomy is really, you're empowering your participant to be a leader rather than a manager, because most of them are working on some sort of projects. So it's a different structure from that standpoint, isn't it?
Yes. So in the sense that there are still, collections of people working together to accomplish a shared objective, and that is
that's like the true north of the organization, right? Like everybody's clear on this is the big mission we're trying to accomplish, but how we get that done, there's a lot of autonomy to do that.
Well, so the organization as a whole has a purpose, and then each circle inside the organization has a purpose in support of the higher purpose. For example, the support engineers might have a purpose to make the customers successful using Google Cloud Platform. But the support organization as a whole might phrase that a little differently to have a larger perspective.
So now, as you kind of get into your practice moving forward into 2022, how do you see yourself kind of identifying who is the right fit, ideal client for you?
My ideal client is a tech team, a technical leader who has either IT team or a software development team or some other team. Because being a recovering engineer myself, I know how to speak geek, and they want to engage more of the whole person that's coming to work. They want to have a shared sense of purpose, shared values. They want to do more inviting of the team instead of pushing the team, and they want the team to be more engaged, to have a greater sense of ownership and a greater stake in how effective the team as a whole is. So that's my ideal client, and then I'll come alongside those team leaders and help them to show them ways they can make that happen, and if they want me to engage me as a consultant to actually work with the team directly, I can do that too.
So now, is some of the frustration that they might be having is that they're not satisfied with the level of performance or the amount of worker engagement? Are those some of the issues that they're struggling with right now where you can help?
Definitely. I'm sure people have seen the reports in Inc. magazine and the Wall Street Journal about how the worker engagement is a fraction of what it should be. I can't remember the numbers, but it's something like 25% of or less of workers around the world are engaged in the work. The rest are or I'm really looking for another job. To be able to the key there, in my opinion, is to at least from the leader's perspective, is to help them to reinvent the work, or for them to co-create a work environment that is more inviting and more engaging, and it has more intrinsic motivation. So work shouldn't be just a job. Work should be you're going to spend the vast majority of your waking hours doing work, or at least a significant part of it. So it shouldn't be this thing where you're just coasting and getting by and waiting for your paycheck.
So how do you help them kind of reposition in the mind of the worker that it is more than a job? Like, what are some of the things that you can be doing to kind of instill more meaning?
The first thing to do is to to cultivate an environment of psychological safety. This is something that Google did some internal research on, and on what makes for an effective team, and psychological safety came out far and away the most important characteristic of effective teams. And without that, hardly anything else matters, because if it's not a safe place for me to let down my mask or to be authentic and genuine with my teammates, then nothing else is really you're not going to really make any other practice or any other advances in creating a great work culture.
But is psychological safety something, is that in the eye of the beholder? Is my psychological safety different than yours?
Psychological safety is definitely a perception, but it's something that is cultivated amongst people. So it's fundamentally, do I feel safe enough that I could take reasonable risks? And if I fail at a project, as long as I've made a good faith effort, is that going to reflect poorly on my standing in the organization, or can I make a mistake and feel like I can own up to it, or can I push back on something that leadership says is a way to do it, and I say, can I say, wait a minute, did you consider this? Or I'm not sure you have all the facts, and so can I? Or the team's plate is overloaded. What do we need to let go of so we can take on this new project that you're asking us to take on? So do they feel safe enough to do that? That sort of thing. That's something that is probably going to be shared amongst all the team members, at least all the team members that have been there for at least a few weeks.
Now, when you're doing something like that, how do you kind of create an environment that allows that to happen, but still not really, I don't know if encourage is the right word, but you don't want to have a room full of people second guessing every single call because they have an opinion. Also, I mean, you want to hear everybody, I guess, but you can't act on everybody's vision of what is the next right move.
Certainly, and that's why holacracy in particular is not a democracy. While people are empowered to take actions to fulfill their role, and they can object to a proposal to the extent that it detracts from their ability to energize the purpose of their own role, or the purpose of the team. But just because they might have an opinion about a proposal, if it's not going to affect any roles that they fill, they don't have a voice.
But that's under the holacracy model, right? I mean,
Yes.
Most companies aren't practicing holacracy.
That's true. And so I'm kind of conflating things. But in psychological safety, the general tendency is that unless people feel deeply impacted by something, they're probably not going to speak up. There's a built-in tendency in the human psyche to let things ride without making waves, and it's
that's just human behavior.
It is, and so the problem that you're proposing, that if everybody has a voice, we can't act on all the voices. Well, those voices are generally very small, so it's usually not an issue.
Right. Okay. Now you mentioned also risk. Most organizations give lip service to being okay with taking risks, but you can only fail so many times before they're going to start going, maybe you're not the right person for the job.
So there's two things there. One is, yes, organizations will have posters on the wall that encourage you to to
push the
reach out and
envelope,
stretch.
right? Think
Yeah,
outside the box, all of that stuff that they want you to do. But
Yes.
sometimes when you're doing that, you're going to fail miserably and dramatically, and it's not going to work. And don't you think that people are a little gun shy, that they don't want to be the one that keeps coming up with harebrained ideas that never work? But the only way you're going to find those breakthroughs are, when you are taking those kind of big swings.
Probably the best way to illustrate a way of managing risk is what Google does. They in Google SRE they have the blameless postmortem. I wouldn't call it a protocol, but it's a system of handling large failures. So in a blameless postmortem, after a failure has happened, and if somebody pushed the wrong button, we'll uncover that later on. But after the failure, there's an analysis to see what were the events that led up to the failure, and what was the sequence, and how did we respond to the failure, and how did we get things back to a stable state. And usually that, or very often, that postmortem it might be led by a team leader, or it might be led by the person who was on call at the time and had the most impact on making the failure a failure. So once they've collected all the information, the whole idea there is, first, assume benign intent. Nobody on the team is trying to make the system fail. Make that assumption, and if it's not true, you have bigger problems.
Right.
That means you have a saboteur.
Yeah, that's obvious. Good point.
So let's assume that nobody wants to make the system failure. So the only other reason, the only two reasons to let somebody go is if they're malicious, which would be the saboteur, or they're completely incompetent and that cannot be fixed. They cannot be reassigned to another job. They can't be trained. The vast majority of problems are systemic. Either the tools to do the monitoring and detecting of the situation and do a situational awareness were inadequate, or the tools to rectify the situation were inadequate, or the documentation was poor, or the metrics were poor, or the training was poor. Or communication amongst the team, or with other teams that had to be part of the scenario were poor. So that these are all systemic problems, not personal problems. And so the question is, what can we do now to tune our system to avoid or better respond to this kind of a failure in the future? So that's something that the organization can do, or the team can do, that really cultivates a sense of psychological safety. Is, no, we're going to assume the best of intent, and unless proven otherwise, we're going to go with that.
So now, if there's a company out there that wants to have a conversation with you or somebody on your team to improve their performance and maybe just drive better and more engaged workforce, what is the best way to get a hold of you? Is there a website?
Probably the best way to reach out to me is on LinkedIn. My handle there is Brian K Haney. My website is BrianKHaney.com, and my email address is, I'm going to say this out loud, bkh@BrianKHaney.com.
And that's Brian K Haney is spelled BrianKHaney.
That's it.
Well, Brian, thank you so much for sharing your story today. It is an exciting journey for you, and a lot of fun adventures ahead, I'm sure.
I'm looking forward to it.
All right. Well, we appreciate you coming on and sharing your story. You're doing important work, and we appreciate you.
It's been a great conversation, Lee.
All right. This is Lee Cantor. We'll see y'all next time on Coach the Coach Radio.